room for steamboat captains and people that were coming down the river. This was a guest room. Notice it's not attached. There's no passageway into the basic part of the house except to the porch. This is the portico. So that was a separate accommodation for guests. This chamber over here could have been used for family members or anyone. Now with the passage of time and with prosperity, as their plantation grew, they added more to the house, and the parlor's over here. And now, I'm not sure, I know my great-grandmother's house had a parlor. Old houses always had a parlor. Someone can tell me why the parlor was so important. This house has a parlor there, a parlor here, a parlor there, 3 parlors, then a chamber, kitchen. With the development of time, then the kitchen, when slaves went out and they quit using the basement cooking area, and cooking in the basement was a common practice. And I saw Butch Scott, not Scott. Where's Butch? Wait. Hey, he's back there. Okay, Butch. There in the old Towsey house, in the basement there, was the old kitchen that served the house when the Towseys lived there. Which is a common practice in those days, especially when you had slave help. So now we've gone to the second floor. With the passage of time, initially this house had these. See those there? Those were dormer windows out onto the roof of the house, and to accommodate the bed chambers upstairs. With the passage of time, though, those dormers were filled in, those were turned into closets, and the dormers were abandoned with the passage of time and with the development and the additions onto the house. As the house grew, certain features were changed. But those, now see, there's the house without the dormers, as it was when Robert Piatt, you might say, passed it on and sold it. He sold it after, shortly after his wife Nancy Piatt died in 1836. Robert Piatt did marry again, oddly enough. I mean, he was getting up in years, but he married a lady 18 years younger than his wife, and he married a Towsey, Moses Towsey's daughter. Hey, Butch, there comes the Towsey house again. We're going to throw Towsey's names out here. They were very prominent in the development of this community, as were the Piatts, very prominent and distinguished people with service to their country in many ways. They became lawyers, judges, doctors, everything. And so now we're looking at the west elevation of the house. This is toward the big bend in the river. This is the north elevation, the very back of the house, and this is the east, facing the river, the big bend in the river. All right, now here we're looking at somewhat at the interior of the house after it's been altered. Keep in mind, at one time there were dormers up here. You can see where they kind of were. That was changed. Every room had a beautiful fireplace. A cousin of mine named Andrew Gray McConnell, whose great-grandmother lived in this house, before it was torn down, he salvaged this fireplace and took it to his home and on the Perryville Road in Danville. And so that's the only thing I know that still exists from this house is the mantle that came out of that fireplace. There's the basement area. There's where the cooking was done, and in the basement. All right, and there's the visitors' room, guest room that had access only to the portico on that side. Okay. Now we're talking about the Piatt family. They were such a family. This is the home of Jacob Piatt, Revolutionary soldier, and this is Federal Hall. This is located upriver from Petersburg. There's not much left. There's nothing but a rocks left of it now. It's been on fire. There's Federal Hall. This was when it was taken, a picture in 1905, facing the river. This was Jacob Piatt, another fabulous soldier of the Revolutionary War, close compatriot of Washington. He built, this is Federal Hall. This is another view from the eastern side of Federal Hall. The Piatt family, they were so distinguished and such an important contribution both to the foundation of our country and to its early development. That's the picture of Federal Hall. And Jacob Piatt is buried out here, maybe 200 yards from the house in the cemetery is where he's buried as a Revolutionary soldier. This is virtually inaccessible, except to crazy people like myself that walked up there in the wintertime and ace around seat time. We did a lot of crazy things. I mean, tromping around the county. But that is nearly, it's the most isolated part of Boone County, I would say, today. 275 Bridge is upstream from this. Petersburg is downstream. So, and this Towsey Town was located in, this is in the community of where Towsey Town, which no longer exists, was at one time located. Towsey Town had a ferry and a commercial operation, a cording mill and a wool mill and things like that. Okay, let's move on. There, another picture. Oh, now, the most, perhaps when we get down to our illustrious sons from Boone County, we come to General Edward Richard Spriggs Canby. His mother was Elizabeth Piatt. His mother was a sister to Robert Piatt, and she married Dr. Canby, and they had a cabin there in the East Bend Bottoms, and where that cabin is, I don't know. I mean, it'd take an archaeologist to locate it, but it was on Robert Piatt's property on the farm, and that he gave to his daughter Elizabeth, and she married Dr. Canby, and his son Edward Richard Spriggs Canby was born there and raised there until Dr. Canby moved to Wabash, Indiana, and Canby, as a young man, went to Wabash College and then got an appointment to West Point, and this man, to be a native of Boone County, accepted the final surrender of the Civil War from Kirby Smith and Taylor. The Confederate generals were the last, after Appomattox and after Grant received Lee's surrender, Canby received their surrender in Mississippi, of the last two Confederate forces of the Civil War. Canby was then tragic in 1867. After the war was over, he was sent to California. He had a distinguished career in the military to negotiate a peace settlement with the Modoc Indians, and unfortunately at the peace settlement it wasn't too peaceful. He got tomahawked and he was killed, and it was unfortunate, but he's well recognized as an outstanding character, and you can tell by the look of the man, he looks distinguished. I mean, doesn't he look great? Okay, I'll move ahead. But he was born there at Boone County. Now, John Hiram Piatt was so involved, that's another brother of Robert, with the War of 1812. John Piatt, there in the same area, developed a banking system in Cincinnati, and he helped finance the War of 1812 to the point that he had lent the U.S. government, now keep in mind, he lent the U.S. government what amounted to $163,000 to supply commissary items to the troops here in the Northwest Territory around Lake Erie, there in this general area. And there were many Kentuckians were involved here in the War of 1812, and some of them, of course, went to New Orleans, to the south, but most of our people went up to the east, especially the Lake Erie area. And he had lent the federal government the commissary funds to supply the troops and the Indians, the friendly Indians. Well, when the war was over and we had defeated the English, he had only gotten a fraction of his money back, and he wasn't able to pay his suppliers of primarily hardtack and pork bellies, is what they fed the troops, and so his creditors then threw him in jail, and he died there. His heirs then brought suit against the federal government, took it all the way to the Supreme Court, and it wasn't until 1875 that the federal government finally paid Piatt's heirs the money that was due them, which they admitted was due them, but they didn't get any interest on the money. But they got the initial investment back with no interest after that many years. The federal government has done crazy things for a long time. It's nothing new, nothing new. Okay. There's, oh yeah, we had a picture of the hardtack on there. Yeah, there's the hardtack. That's what he was supplying, that and pork bellies in barrels to the troops and the Indians, specifically states and the Indians. All right, we'll move ahead. And Jacob Piatt, he was another member of the family who became the judge of in Ohio. They became quite prominent in the metropolitan Cincinnati area, the Piatt family. And Piatt Park is named for them. At one time, it was called, the Piatt family gave the park to the city. They named it 8th Street Park. Then, after the Civil War, they named it Garfield Park for General Garfield. And then finally, the Piatt family said, wait a minute, we gave you this land 50 years ago, 100 years ago. We think you ought to name it Piatt Park. And they showed up where they found 150 Piatts, but there were that many relatives showed up and petitioned the Cincinnati Council to change it back to Piatt Park, which is what it is today. But Benjamin Piatt was one of those distinguished members of the family. Okay? And that's one of the things the Piatt started the first fire department in Cincinnati. And up to that time, fire departments were all voluntary. And they would put out your house after they checked the book to make sure you voluntarily paid for it, you know. And so Piatt said, wait a minute. He said, we need fire protection that we can depend on, that's publicly supported, it's part of the public good. So Cincinnati started the first paid fire department in the United States. And the volunteer firemen were so upset that they weren't getting their money for putting out fires that they tried to storm Piatt's home and tried to tar and feather him, in fact, but they failed in that attempt. Okay, let's move ahead. And now Don Piatt, and then an interesting way to spell Don, another one he was a colonel in the military, and notice Louise Kirby Piatt, I don't know where the Kirby family is kin to that, but we do have the Kirby families. But Colonel Don Piatt was also a member of brother to the clan. Okay? And then Benjamin McCullough Piatt. He settled in Covington. He owned the real property there. He opened the law office in the First National Bank building, which is there. That was located, I think, on Madison Avenue. I'm not certain.
6th and Madison.
6th and Madison, right. And it, of course, has been going for years. All right, the next one. And Abraham Piatt, another brother. And he was the one that stayed a farmer. Bless his heart, somebody had to keep doing that, you know.